just my God.
Hello, everybody. This is Bart Sharp, and you are on Becoming Quantum Conscious at United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 107.7 and 103.5 out of the beautiful city of New Orleans, Louisiana. We hope that everybody down there is really happy and dry. In my home state of Texas, Austin, Texas, we just send our condolences to all of those who've lost loved ones and those who are in struggle with all of the flooding down there. It really breaks my heartstrings to think about what's going on with all the suffering there. So we send that out, but we are not there today. I am still in lovely France, into the historical ancient city of Rennes-les-Bains, which was a Roman town, a spa town. Even Emperor Augustus and stories say that Claudia Pilate lived here. That would be wife of Pontius Pilate. And we go into all kinds of stories about Mary Magdalene and Jesus and the scenes and all of these fine folks living here. I don't know if they were hanging with the Romans. I'm sure they weren't. But all of that is part of the history. And right in the middle of the history here is the home of Richard Stanley. And before I say any more, I'd just also like to say that you can catch this show on Facebook, YouTube, UPRN, Talk Radio website, and Roku. As I get distracted when I end at big times like this. Last year we were here at the same time. A wild night, and I expect nonetheless with Richard Stanley.
Well, it's a delight to be back on the show, Bart. A pleasure to have you here in my library.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. We were just eating pizza at Chez Will. That'd be W-I-L-L. His name is Will. It's a house at Will, a nice Englishman. The best pizzas, I think, in the area. I've not had one better. So if you're in Rennes-les-Bains, that is the place to see that. So, you know, Richard is a director, movie director. Movies such as Hardware, Dust Devil, Color Out of Space.
You got it.
I got that one right. And many more. But also, Richard is a historian of magnitude. And we're going to talk about the Cathars, which I've heard this. He sat down with one of my tour groups and gave us a 1 hour jaw-dropping conversation on the history of Cathars. And I just figured that we needed to kind of do something like that tonight. Just to talk about the Cathars and these amazing people, because there's much legend as they are fact, and there's much of these tear-jerking stories that, you know, just bring your hearts alive with their nobility and their sincerity and true hearts. They inspire us all. And then there's other stories. I've not met anybody that can piece them better together than you, though.
Well, thank you for that vote of confidence, but I mean, I'd probably like to say up front that I certainly don't claim to be a Cathar, but I am a Cathar sympathizer. And had I been alive in those days in the late 13th century, in early 13th century, late 12th, I probably would have defended them for sword, because I am very fond of them, even if I'm not one myself. And yeah, trying to define what a Cathar is has become increasingly difficult, I guess, in the modern era, because there's plenty of folk out there who would happily tell us that there's no such thing as Cathars, from the point of view that the so-called Cathars never used this word to describe themselves.
What would they describe themselves as?
I think initially they just referred to each other as Christians. Yeah, good men, good woman, bonhomme, Sometimes they talk about the perfecti, the adepts as the old good beards, the Bon Barb. But yeah, Cathar feels like it was an Inquisition Crusader era term, which back in the day in yeah 12th 13th century people were largely illiterate. You'd have to be from an aristocratic family or have gone to school or to have learned to read and write. So yeah, the precise spelling of words is often a bit futsy. So Cathar does come from possibly from the Greek katharos, from the word for pure, and it could be a word describing to be purged or purified. But it's highly likely that it's related to insults, to calumnies, fight words. The Teutonic Knights refer to witches as Ketzers, Keter, which is from black cat, and this notion that heretics worship cats, which is something that flew around partly because of this notion of Rex Mundi, the Lord of the World, and the idea of the Lord of the World being a devil, and then the devil being represented by a black cat, which is somehow how we got to the Teutonic Knights calling witches Ketzers. Ketters. And in the Crusade times, the Muslims, of course, would have referred to anyone who wasn't a Muslim or a follower of the one God as a Kafir, as in Kafiristan. And Kafiristan in Afghanistan, the last land to be conquered by the Muslims, the land of the Kafir. And this, with the F in Kafir versus the TH in Cathar, I don't think is a big difference in a pre-literate medieval world. I think they're essentially the same word. And I guess this fight word used to identify people who are different from the straight and narrow of the Mother Church, from the Holy Roman dogma or the accompanying dogma of Islam.
So the Cathars word is just almost like a slang word that came from another place. And before you respond to that, I'd just like to say hello to Phyllis Mim and Miss Rocher for joining in tonight. They were on the tour the other day and saw you at Chez Oui.
Super.
So they're here with us in spirit and on the radio. If you have any questions for Richard, please type them out and we'll try to get to the best of them.
Please fire away. Always happy to answer heretical questions and to spread a bit of the old heresy around, because although it's been gone for more than 7 centuries, there are a lot of ideas in Catharism that we all really secretly dig, and which we wish could get patched back into the matrix of human experience, because I think there were things that would have helped our civilization along if they'd been allowed to flourish.
And indeed, they were a pure people. And if you live in this area, and it's almost like just a group of people just keep referring to Mary Magdalene and the Cathars are these pure people, like a role model from the past that is brought out in the fables and the stories of the perfect people, the parfait, so to speak.
Well, it was an initiatory faith that had hidden inner levels, and I think the idea throughout was to seek perfection, to try and perfect oneself, and of course that's an unending process. I don't think you can ever reach a point of true perfection. The Cathar adepts are referred to as perfecti or parfaits, or straight up perfect. And I think perfection is something you have to strive for every moment of the day, and it's a constant struggle between the spirit and the desires of the gross material world.
And when we think about this, when I think about the spiritual journey, I always think of it as extremely joyful. The more you evolve and the more you ascend up to these higher levels, it actually feels good. And I don't know if the Cathars were really tuned in that way. I don't know if that was even possible in that day and age of 10th, 11th century, that they were dancing in ecstasy, so to speak, due to the practice and development of their inside self. They were hardworking people. They said a lot of prayers, a lot of chanting. And as we know, when we go to the sacred sites, uh, they can be quite transcendental. So maybe they were, maybe they weren't.
Yeah, let's grasp the nettle with the primary differences between Catharism and conventional Christianity. Why were they considered heretics to begin with? And why are we still talking about them 700 years after they technically became extinct? Really, they're a form, I would suggest, a form of proto-Christianity, an earlier tranche of Christianity that evolved before the coming of the Holy Roman Church, which became the Orthodox.
Let me say that again. An earlier form of Christianity before the Roman Catholic Church. Did I get that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Proto-Christianity. Before Christianity became Christianity, it already existed. Like even before the coming of Christ, John the Baptist and the Essenes are already practicing a baptismal faith based on baptism and revelation.
So you think the Cathars really came from the John the Baptist lineage then?
I have to stay on the fence of that because academics would tear me to pieces if I said yes.
We can have blood and
But
gore.
yeah,
It's your house, and we won't mind
a lot of people are very firmly opposed to that idea because it's a chicken and the egg thing. Obviously, if the Cathars existed before the Holy Roman Church, which existed long before the Reformation, it makes them into the Christianity, kind of the closest we can get to a form of Christianity that hasn't yet been monkey wrenched by 7 centuries of patriarchal rule and the Inquisition killing anyone who disagreed with them. So it gives us a chance to turn back the clock and try to imagine what Christianity might have been for the first 1,000 years or so of its existence. But the Cathars weren't suppressed until the 12th century.
Well, it brings up that inquisitive question. Was Mary Magdalene part in that line of the John the Baptist and the Essenes? And, you know, a lot of people say, well, that would be Yeshua or AKA Jesus. All followers of John the Baptist, all followers of even earlier dates with Solomon and David. Am I following the line correctly?
I think you are, sir. I mean, it's pure speculation from the point of view that we've got no archaeological evidence really to maintain it. But what we do see is that both figures are hugely important out here. A number of churches named after Mary Magdalene, number of sites associated with her, there are a lot. And you also run into John the Baptist at practically every turn in different stained glass windows, in statuary. He's clearly a very important figure out here.
Yes.
Both of them.
And they're not just put there because they're pretty, folks. You know, let's have a pretty statue of Mother Mary or Mary Magdalene. Everything here in a church is trying to tell a story. And every church and their members and congregations generally have followed something for generations. And a lot of those churches, we do not know the origins of when those traditions started.
Yeah, I mean, we're deviating somewhat from the job description of Catharism, but the golden myth is that Mary Magdalene, Martha, and Lazarus, and the folk from the Holy Land are supposed to have come here in 8 AD in a ship without oars or sails that landed at Sainte Marie de la Mer, which is, yeah, the myth on which it all hangs. And I do believe that regardless of the reality of the sacred family and whether Christ or Mary Magdalene really walked these streets or walked these hills, it's pretty clear that early Christian missionaries presumably fanned out through the existing Roman trade routes. And in the first 10, 20, 30 years after the crucifixion, you would have seen the first traces of Christianity filtering into these different Roman border towns. Here in really Aqua Calidae, where we're sitting now, was a big Roman trading hub at the time, and yeah, a natural port of call for either fleeing Christians or Christians who were looking to spread the gospel and spread the word.
And also you had the Roman gods. You also had Isis. You had a variety of things. And then the down Visigoths, who all of these varieties of people live in here with different ideologies.
It's fair to say that there was a cult of femininity that has existed here in the Pyrenees since a very, very long time ago. I
Yes.
mean, this comes down to the different mother goddesses, the different white goddesses, the Dame Blanches that are found in the caves. I'm holding
Wow.
a reproduction of a Neolithic piece, the Dame de Brassemboy, who is a lady with nice dreadlocks,
She does, and this is a
braids.
little white statue, and this is a local legend here of the white goddess that appears even still today to people. But there's stories over the centuries of the white goddess appearing. Um, and it also often gets mixed up with Mother Mary. That's another story. Phyllis Mim, thanks for asking this question. She asks, oh gosh, I wish I could read it now, were they descendants from the Essenes lineage, meaning the Cathars?
Well, the Cathars themselves certainly believed so. And the story was that the Cathar adepts, the initiates, the perfecti, could only become adepts if they received something called the consolamentum. And this consolamentum was a ritual involving the laying on of hands. And you had to be touched by the hand of another adept who had been touched by the hand of another adept, like a kind of spiritual game of tag. And I know they believed that this tradition went all the way back to the Essenes, to the time of John the Baptist, and that it had been an unbroken transmission that had passed down since, the time of the Essenes. Whether this was true or not, we have no idea.
So you might have a history of everybody from beginning from the person that touched you, and then who touched them, and then so on and so forth, that went back in a lineage, almost like a family generational pattern. But this is like the blessing pattern.
Yeah, it was a direct transmission. It had to be a direct lineage that was passed on by literally touching the hand of another adept who had been touched by the hand of another adept for generations and generations. And this consolamentum, which was given to most normal people only at the point of dying, because once you'd received it, you kind of almost ceased to participate in the material world. I mean, the Cathar Perfecti distanced themselves so far from the material world that many of them deliberately fasted to death and entered into a state of endura. Certainly, you give up eating meat and give up conjugal rights. It became a very, very strong form of asceticism. But I think the idea was that, well, from what little we understand, 700 years later, was that rather than the consolamentum being an act of revelation or initiation, it was really an act of anamnesis, meaning it was an act of remembrance, that when you were touched by the hand, you remembered who you really were. You remembered that your true life stretches beyond one's birth and one's death. And it's a little bit like being hit over the head with an enlightenment stick or something. It was obviously a very powerful experience. And folk who received the consolamentum gave up their secular lives. And
also, I would think that would be a challenge to remember more. That then you were set on a mission to really discover the intricacies of all of what that was. I'm kind of a non-believer that nobody gets touched and everything changes just like that. You maybe get touched and you turn a corner, maybe, and then you start a new pattern. What do you think of that theory?
It's difficult to know what the consolamentum was. I mean, I'd sure like to have received it to actually know, yeah. But unfortunately, because it was a line of direct transmission, because of this detail that you had to be touched by the hand of another adept who was touched by another adept, it spread in the same way as a kind of a spiritual virus.
Wow.
And that enabled the Holy Roman Church and the Inquisition to destroy it, because they treated it like a virus. They deliberately isolated everyone who had come into contact with these holy men, with these adepts, and separated them from the rest of the community.
But also that would mean that you would have your own spiritual path and direction separate from the church, wouldn't it? I mean, it's like if you were anointed like that with this Solamentum, it means that you would know your path, which it's kind of hard for a control freak like the Catholic Church to accept.
Yeah, and beyond all that, I think the essence of gnosis is direct knowledge, direct communion with the deity, with the spiritual forces, except no intermediaries, no priests, prelates, bishops, archbishops, go straight to source. So this emphasis on not only direct initiation but direct knowledge of the mysteries kind of shortcuts the whole pyramid power structure of the church. So that was one part of it. I guess an emphasis on spirit over matter also meant a tendency towards extreme poverty and a lack of interest in paying taxes, which is another thing that obviously pissed the church off, because that whole pyramid power structure exists only to ream the people and basically gather all of the money and direct it towards its apex, which is why they'd created it to begin with. And Catharism kind of short circuits that. But beyond that, other little details that are, I guess, important, just boxes to tick. They believed in reincarnation, although Christianity, they had a lot in common with Buddhism, and also could also be viewed as a kind of proto-Buddhism, because back in the 12th century, we're also talking a time when the Lotus Sutra hadn't yet been written. So it's as much a proto-Buddhism as a proto-Christianity. And they believed that not only in reincarnation, but in the form of karma, that you could improve yourself over successive material incarnations from one lifetime to the next. And if you took the Consolamentum, allegedly you would be liberated from the cycles of time and return to the true kingdom of heaven that exists beyond the illusory veil of the material world. Another concept that it has in common with Buddhism, this notion of the realm of Maya, or the illusory material world into which our consciousness is apparently downloaded.
So it just brings up so many ideas about the Consolamentum, because, I mean, to me, that would be quite a hardship and commitment, because it basically means you have more potential to become something really awesome. And, basically, if I had the Consolamentum put on me and I felt it heartfelt and I had my whole life ahead of me, it means that I better get to work, because it's quite a commitment to say that you had the potential of remembering all of this lineage, of all the lessons, all the wisdom, all the high vibrational learning these people achieved. You had that opportunity to embody it. You're not normal anymore.
Yeah, and to secure that transmission, to be able to tell by the brightness of their eyes who is ready to receive it, and to pass it on, so that the current, the hidden stream, the underground stream, keeps flowing from one era to the next. So it's a responsibility. But within that, the whole quest for perfection is in itself something which a battle you have to fight every day of your life, and right to the end. I don't think any of the Cathar adepts, the perfecti, were themselves truly perfect people, but they tried to be. They constantly course corrected and tried to find a better way of doing things, and just constantly challenging the process on a daily basis is, I guess, already a very good start. I mean, we see within the individual stories of the Cathar perfecti that they had these different problems. That Belibast, the last Cathar, murders another shepherd and manages to get his housekeeper pregnant, and then tries to blame one of the shepherds in order to pretend that he hadn't slept with her because he was frightened he would have lost his consolamentum if he had made love to the housekeeper. So they were, at the perfecti were less than perfect themselves, just like priests. They were trying to do their best under the circumstances, and I think just to struggle towards perfection on a daily basis is already a difficult thing for any human being to pull off in any century.
Yeah. When I think about this, I have a friend, Penny Loftus, who keeps telling me she was incarnated in Egypt and remembers those lifetimes. And she tells me a story that the ETs, of course, breeded with the Egyptians, and they created a race, a light race. And that went on for generations. And a lot of that got lost. But it really brings up that idea that maybe even people like David and Solomon came from a lineage like that. And that lineage, what they call a lineage of light, might be brought in through the generations, brought through Solomon and through others, and maybe to John the Baptist and Yeshua, Magdalene, these folks. Maybe it extends on to other generations. And maybe you and I are a little bit ET with that light language. I'm just throwing out wild ideas, but I know you're a historian and I'm a psychic, so.
Well, I guess I'm a historian and I'm also a Cathar sympathizer. And we do have a lot of reincarnation issues out here, so it's a discussion in its own right. Of course, the Cathars believed in reincarnation, but they also believed that if you took the consolamentum and lived a good life and died a martyr's death, that you would return to the true kingdom of heaven and escape the cycles of time and the material world. So hopefully for them, unless something went wrong with the consolamentum, a lot of those folk have moved on. Whether there's such a thing as a Cathar bodhisattva or this concept of ascended masters, that's another issue. Or whether it was possible for those folk to step outside of time and outside of the deterministic prison of the material world, so that on some channel they still exist now. I mean, we don't understand time too good to begin with. I mean, it's fairly likely that everything that we believe to be in the past is still happening somewhere on some channel, just as the future is happening now. It's just how we process it or experience time as if we're moving through it at a constant pace. If you had non-linear access to that program, like the Cathar adepts claimed, you could step outside of the time cycle.
Maybe it even is kind of getting out of that linear world and saying, well, I'll reincarnate, or I'll carnate out of human existence and into perfection to a spirit being. But maybe that's just a totally different non-linear reality in itself of service. But one thing that I know is very linear is that we are midpoint in the show. And I just wanted to tell everybody that you are listening to Richard Stanley. And you can check out Richard's work at the official richardstanley.com, but also you can buy his movies. And it's really funny because when you see the movies, you start to see they're horror movies, but all of these very deep messages, a lot connected to Catharism, consciously and unconsciously. But some of his movies are Dust Devil, Hardware, Color Out of Space.
Yeah, you got it. And I've done a bunch of documentaries too, and have a book coming next month in August from Inner Traditions and Simon & Schuster in the US, which is a book called Otto Rahn Grail Hunter, which is another whole program's worth of debate in its own right, but that's coming. and have tried to make documentaries about this material, notably The Secret Glory and The Other World, and trying to preach heresy in the 21st century is a thorny and difficult path for even the best of us. That's for sure.
I never have a boring conversation with Richard, I had to say,
Yeah.
because you are so much of a Renaissance man in a lot of different ways. And one of the passions is Catharism, and this driving. Before we get back on that topic, I want to tell everybody that you are on Becoming Quantum Conscious. This is Richard Stanley. I am Bart Sharp, and this is United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 107.7 and 103.5 FM out of New Orleans, Louisiana. Also on Roku, YouTube, Facebook, and the UPRN Talk Radio website if you want to tune in there. Also, I invite you to go to my YouTube channel, Bart Sharp 1, because I have live broadcasts of all my shows, and it's always nice that you can tune in and join the chat on that particular channel. Become a subscriber if you wish. And one of the big sacred places that everybody knows, if you are into any of this stuff, is Chateau de Montségur. And you love that place. You've lived there for many years.
Yeah, no, I spent 10 years in Montségur, and probably at this stage know more about it than any other English-speaking person left alive, and got very, very close to it. So yeah, Montségur was, I guess, the sanctuary, the last redoubt of Catharism. It was built as a safe place to receive the fleeing heretics, and to as a place where their treasures could be safely held and stored. It was a place they thought the Crusaders and the Inquisitors would never dare to come, because it was already a very powerful spot even before the Cathars arrived. And the thing I want to cycle back to with Catharism is this notion of stepping outside of the cycles of time. Like Montségur, the Cathar citadel, was endowed. It was basically created and financed by a high priestess of the faith, the Countess of Foix, Esclairmonde de Foix, who basically created Montségur as a safe place, literally as the secure mountain Montségur. And this Esclairmonde, although a very real historic figure, is never supposed to have died. We have no date for her death, nor any details of her death. We know all about her life, her birth, her marriage, her kids. She only became an initiated Cathar after living a full life as a wife and mother. And but her death is completely unrecorded. And according to the mythology, she never died, but Esclairmonde lives still. And moreover, not only does Esclairmonde live, not only is she still there in the castle.
Yeah, there's stories about her appearing in the castle to certain people and such. Oddly enough, Abraham Lincoln does the same thing in the White House, so I'm told. Maybe he needs to shake some people up these days. However,
but beyond that, if this notion of Esclairmonde stepped alive into the kingdom of heaven or ascended like the prophet Elijah, also on the Pog of Montségur, despite the 10-month siege and battle that took place there at the tail end of the story, they've only ever found 2 skeletons. Wow. All the other dead are missing. And nor is Esclairmonde the only major figure in the story to simply disappear out of the historic record. Guillabert de Castries, the last male head of the Cathar Church, goes to Montségur and is never heard of again, just along with the sacred treasure, along with Archbishop Tento and many other Cathar dignitaries we know go to Montségur. But when the castle fell, they're not on the list of the people taken captive, and their names don't appear amongst the 300 or so who died at the stake on the Camp de Cremat.
Two questions. One is what happened to the Book of Love, and two, I've heard of fables that Montsegur had was a place where you could directly ascend to, I won't say heaven, but that's probably what they would say.
I think a lot of people believe that. And certainly even before the siege, many people came there to die, to spend their last days in Montsegur. And I mean, Esclamont almost certainly spent her last days in Montsegur, as did Guillaume de Castries. But we have not a single scrap of evidence, not a single tooth, nothing to show that potentially hundreds of human beings died up there. So until the Cathar necropolis is uncovered by archaeologists, if such a thing exists, it keeps open this nagging possibility that maybe they're still there.
Yes, I think something happened there. Well, we're on. There we are. We are. We want to say hi to Heidi Cole. Hi there from Boulder, Colorado, Heidi.
Excellent. So yeah, just to say, maybe the Book of Love is still there too, as is maybe the Holy Grail. If Esclamont de Foire is still there, if those people are still there on some other channel, then maybe on some other vibrational frequency, the treasure is still there too, because it's strange to me that no one's ever found it.
It is strange that no one has ever found it, and not even rumors that it's been stuck back in the vaults in Rome, so to speak. You know, there's a interesting theory. Alethea Sophia, Pistis Sophia, was on their show a few weeks ago, brought up is that it might have just been impressed in various places, like put into the land or put into my favorite cave, the Grot of Bethlehem, which is one of the new power spots I found. It's something that feels, when you touch it, you feel nothing but joy and love when you touch it. You have to know how to kind of activate it, but maybe that's one of the theories. It is everywhere.
Now, there's certainly something there. I mean, the sense of the invisible brethren of the heights, or there being other folk or things around one in some of these places, in the cave of the hermit, say, if you go and turn out the light, yeah, many of these spots, the sense that almost a multitude of other presences are crowded around is, I think, very commonly reported.
Yes, and to tell listeners that they do not understand this, on the opposite, well, you have Montsegur, and then you have this huge peak called Peak St. Barthélemy, and on the other side are the 7 Cathar initiation caves, of which one of them is the cave where you go into total darkness for, some people say 40 days, I've heard. I don't know, but imagine how many Cathar parfaits or to-be parfaits and parfaites went into those and kind of transformed, lost themselves, so to speak, and found themselves as a new being if you went into darkness for 40 days.
Yeah, I don't think you ought to try going into darkness for 40 days. I mean, certainly sensory deprivation in the initiatory caves plays a part in the initiatory process, and has done ever since the Eleusinian Mysteries. It's always been a part of mystery schools and the initiatory process.
Any theories about how long you think they stayed?
Not precisely. I mean, all the 48 days and the details about the initiatory caves is coming through the filter of Anthony Goodall, and it's not gospel. And
no.
If you and I hate to be a Debbie Downer in any way, but I mean, NASA and the US Navy and people have done extensive tests on sensory deprivation. There's Air Force pilots and people who tap out after about 48 minutes. So going 44 days in complete silence and darkness, I might be beyond the limits of any human being. I mean, carried out, showing that even quite rudimentary mathematics and some different mental functions become significantly altered and impaired after 24 hours, 48 hours in complete sensory deprivation.
Yeah.
Now, I do know of one example of someone who was in a cave here in the Ariège for about 22 days, and this was partly because of this material, because of Goodell's writings about the initiatory caves. I think also involves the same cave, this cave of the hermit.
Yeah.
After 20 plus days, the unmentioned lady involved had experienced great difficulty processing light information, seeing properly, had to wear a blindfold initially, and was also suffering hair loss. Hair was coming out of her scalp, and skin loss. In my opinion, I thought she was en route to turning into Gollum. Which is a real possibility if you're drinking the groundwater, which is highly acidic, and staying within complete silence and darkness in a lightless place. So I don't know if the ancients would have gone that far. I think 24 hours is strong enough for me.
Yeah. Well, it's good to know. I mean, I've heard different stories, and I've read Antonin Goodell's book. Antonin was a channeler and a historian, and held a lot of Rosicrucian beliefs or practices, and has a great book, a little too pricey for my blood, but I bought it anyway, about a story of a Cathar doing the initiation caves. And of course, most of it is channeled in some historical evidence. So there's so many gaps in this story we really don't know, but you've lived there a big section in your life and have been just an enthusiastic researcher, and you may be the person who knows more about it than anybody else.
Well, months ago, maybe the caves of Usat, no, but I will say in Antonin Goodell's defense that he didn't just channel the information, he also claimed to have been the recipient of an oral tradition that had been passed down from generation to generation. He said he'd received this oral transmission from an old blind man he had been close to as a child, a figure he refers to as Papa Garrigou, who was a historian named Adolphe Garrigou, that Goodell claims to have received this oral transmission from, and to have passed down the knowledge of the initiatory caves.
Wow,
and
that brings a lot of light to it.
But then equally, Goodell was also the kind of the minister of tourism for the area, the president of the syndicate, the initiative. So did have an interest in promoting Usat Laban. He was obviously must have been a powerful man, apart from him being a close buddy of Otto Rahns from before the war. After the war, after World War II, when they decided to try to revive the Rosicrucian movement in Europe, Jan and Wilhelm Lien from the Netherlands came all the way down here, and they found Antonin Goodell in Usat Laban, and they bent the knee to him and said, basically, be our master. And roughly from that point, Goodell became the spiritual leader, figurehead of the Rosicrucian movement, and proceeded to reform it along his own neo-Cathar lines. So is a complex figure, Goodell.
It is, and a lot of this is referenced in your book on Otto Rahn. If you're curious about it, check out Richard's book, which is in the United States and around the world. It's not hard to find, or you can go to the official richardstanley.com site, and there's information there. Yeah, just such a great, mysterious world with these Cathars. How much we love and adore them, want to be like them. At the same time, they had their weaknesses, they had their faults, but, you know, they were willing to sacrifice something. And we see such evidence of that, particularly at Montsegur. You know, there's a story that that's why they died willingly, is because if they would have, of course, just said, oh, well, we will dedicate ourselves to Roman Catholics, we'll take the vows and be a Roman Catholic, and then the Roman Catholics says, sure, fine. Then they would have took their armies away and everything would have been hunky-dory, but they didn't do that. They burned at the stake and maintained their vows as to their spirituality.
Yeah, they died as martyrs to their unknown time-lost faith. We can't really call them Cathars, and calling them Christians or Buddhists, and that isn't quite there either. And there's a pagan element too, because the high priestesses are at once an initiated Christian priestess and the living goddess. So I guess there's it brings a bunch of things together, but they died as martyrs to that faith and chose not to recant, and believed strongly enough. Moreover, a great many people around them felt the same way. And as we've come through 700 years of history, most of it heavily edited, so that we've only got a shaky idea of what happened back then. There's a tendency for us to project onto the Cathars and to see in them versions of ourselves. So it makes sense that in the present day we see Cathars as being proto-feminists, and there was a time when women could be priests, women could command armies, and there was equal rights. And we can equate their belief in the material world being an illusion to simulation theory and the idea of being downloaded into the matrix. So whereas back a few years ago, I guess in the time of the 70s, we thought of the Cathars as being basically medieval hippies, long-haired, community living. So I think we tend to reinvent them according to what period that we're in.
And our own image.
Grail Marcus's book Lipstick Traces, which talks about the punk movement, tries to draw a line between punk and Montsegur via situationists. So the Cathars can be our hippies, our punks, our feminists, our cyber visionaries, whatever we are. In the way we choose to make them. They were certainly the underdogs of history, because they were unfortunately exterminated from the face of the earth with an appalling viciousness, which remains chilling even at the distance of 7 centuries.
And here they were in this land where there are these amazingly powerful caves, and they did not create the caves that way, just as they did not create all the magical ley lines that all converge on Montsegur, Chateau de Montsegur. They came into a huge history there of something very special, and I really thought they must have used some of that to help in their own spiritual growth. They followed something with the land, and they found their purpose there, and they found so much more. I mean, they were all over France, or at least the southern portion. From what you told me, it's almost like in that community through, the 1st and the 12th century, there would be Cathar towns, there would be Roman Catholic towns, and then Roman towns, or maybe other cultures. They all kind of...
Cathars didn't really exist from the point of view that the word didn't. It's just a term that we apply to them.
Okay,
So
it's
trying to define what was a Cathar town or a Christian town. No one could tell the difference between them. I mean, they thought they were Christians, and I'm sure that the variant forms of Christianity changed from valley to valley, just like dialects. And for 1,000 years or so here in the mountains, they've been mixing it up with all these other strange deities that are around here, and different mystery traditions and cults. I mean, we had Minerva and Yeah, Diana, with her bow, Arduino of the Nine Fires, and we had Epona, the wild horsewoman, the most popular deity for amongst the Roman legionaries. So there were a long tradition of guardian mothers and fierce woman goddesses, which was already going on down here, along with weird snake cults and the cults of Asclepius and different Roman gods of health that were particularly strong here in Ren-le-Ban, which is all about the hot water, which could cure
Wow.
leprosy and skin disease. So the god of the new green leaves, and the god Asclepius, the god of health, with the coiling snakes like the caduceus, would have been strong elements down here. And this proto-Christianity and those other faiths would have coexisted for 1,000 years or so. So by the time we identify these Cathars in the 12th century as being a distinct thing, they've come through a whole filter of stuff. And I think this
Indeed.
tradition has been powerful here for a very long time, since the Ice Age.
Yeah, it gives you an idea of or somewhat of an idea of what diversity there really was, and one that we've talked about before in conversation and first early in the show would be the white goddess, another goddess we
Yeah,
can't really identify or.
and she's always been here in one form or another. I mean, it just shows to me that this cult of femininity was a part of the culture before Christianity arrived, and
Mhm.
maybe that was why it received it in the way it did.
Yeah,
Is because the place was already, I guess, it was a place where the doves of Aphrodite had once fed from Vestal hands, and where the Iberian Celts had worshipped Belisama, Summer Bright, the beautiful one, the Iberian goldish moon goddess on the mountaintops in ancient times. So yeah,
indeed, and
the goddess was strong here.
I haven't shown you the place between Rennes-les-Bains and Rennes-le-Chateau where there's a lot of apparitions, and some people say, oh, that's Mother Mary showing herself. But I think it's the white goddess. That the white goddess does appear, even still today, all throughout this area. Such a magical land.
Yeah, no, and she keeps showing up, and it's hotly disputed as
Yeah,
to who she is. I mean, if she shows up in Montsegur, you can be pretty sure she's Esclamont. I mean,
indeed.
I was talking to this jailbird character in Montsegur who was spent most of his life in jails around France, and he claimed he'd been reformed after seeing the BVM, the Blessed Virgin Mary, a glowing white feminine figure standing in the mouth of Kauno, the cave overlooking Montsegur. It was just like, wow, he saw the White Lady, and he'd given up his life of crime and moved to Montsegur and been fully converted by the experience. And
Wow.
when one of my friends suggested, "Oh, you saw the goddess, you saw Gaia," he got very irate and said, "No, I saw Marie." I say he was very sure it was the Virgin of Lord, that it was that it was Mary. So but nonetheless, glowing mother feminine apparitions are still cited in the region, and I'm sure they were cited back then, and that was one of the reasons why the Holy Roman Church came down so hard on Catharism. Is not only represented a feminine force, but it's also very dangerous to you as a religion when the
Yeah.
other side starts having miracles and having
More.
supernatural phenomena. Yeah, if
Yeah,
when the other
it's
side
really
start healing people
scares
of
you.
their hands, or
Mm.
having visible supernatural apparitions happening, it was enough to scare even the Pope.
Yes, I wanted to say hi to Krishna Rose, who just signed in. She'll be here on 2 weeks. Also, next week we have Mary Kearns, who will talk about speaking to flowers and plants. This is not like a plant communicator or a tree communicator, or a animal communicator, excuse me, but a flower and plant communicator, which I'm going to find really intriguing. We're coming to the end of the show, Richard. You can find Richard's work at the official richardstanley.com. Uh, Projects you want to tell us about? We got a minute left.
Um, Well, yeah, I got a book coming, but I think that's really important. I think what's really important is the one project we should commit ourselves to is not only trying to be better human beings, but trying
Mm,
to treat other human beings as we would like to be treated, and trying to bring some peace to this troubled world, and just starting at home, even in the smallest way, because we're living in crazy times, and if there's any lessons that we can learn from the Cathars, it's we have to try every day, I think, to if we could get to either get back to heaven, or bring heaven here.
yeah, yeah. And you're a man who truly believes this. Richard was on my Christmas show and gave a talk that kind of was bringing me the tears. It was so passionate and really talking about what he's learned. And he was very heart spoken of what Catharsism is in this modern day. I wish I could get it I wish I knew how to edit enough that I could just get that 9 minutes where you were on and put it up because
I
it
wish we
was,
had more than 1 minute. So
I was crying. It was amazing. Yeah. So thank you
yeah,
so much for being on the show.
I think Catharism in the present day is what Catharism always was. Truth is irreducible. Truth
Mm,
doesn't change from one era to another. What was true then remains true now.
yes. It's a good way to end the show, my friend.
Yeah. Thank you for
Bless you.
having me on, sir.
All right, everybody. We'll see y'all next week. The Mary Kearns, Flower Communicator. In 2 weeks, Krishna Rose. And after that, Anna Ortero. So wish everybody the best. And y'all have a great afternoon or evening, as the case may be here. Bye for now.